partying every single day for 21 days straight. 21 days straight, bro. Right? Going hard. Then, that night, it changed everything.
And then in 2003, Wolf gets killed during a situation with BMF,
right?
Which he ended up shooting first, and they returned fire, ended up killing him.
Demetrius and his bodyguard, Bull Height, were on their way to their vehicle when they encountered Wolf Jones and Riz Gertie waiting for them with guns drawn. Wolf Jones started shooting.
All hell broke loose. Gunfire was coming from everywhere.
October 2003, Club Chaos, Atlanta. The music was loud, the liquor was flowing, and the city's most dangerous underworld figures were all in one room.
So we were in Club Chaos this particular night, and one of Meech's friends, Wolf, was there. So Wolf and Meech knew each other because he was Puffy's ex-bodyguard.
On one side, you had BMF, the Black Mafia family, and Big Meech, the most notorious drug empire America had seen since the days of the Medellín Cartel. Headed by Big Meech, they didn't just dominate the streets, they owned the culture. They dictated what happens in Atlanta.
And Meech was like, nah, that's not going down. Whatever y'all got going on, you can handle that privately with her. But if she's standing here with me, I can't have you disrespect her like that.
On the other, you had Anthony Wolf Jones, not just anyone. He was Puff Daddy's former bodyguard and close friend. Some say he was still doing business in the shadows, flexing power from behind the scenes. By sunrise, 2 men were dead. One of them, Wolf, shot execution style. The streets of Atlanta were silent. But make no mistake, something big had just gone down. Something that went deeper than a club fight.
Wild shootout that shattered windows of bars and restaurants and left 2 men dead.
But this wasn't just about Club Chaos. This was about revenge. This was about Jake Robles, Suge Knight's man, who got shot in '95 in Atlanta, and the whispers that Wolf pulled the trigger. BMF never forgot.
Wolf, rest in peace. You know, he let off a shot and let off a couple of shots, and Suge man got killed right there.
You know, there's lots of different stories behind what happened. I remember at one point, Suge's homie gets killed in Atlanta.
Jay.
Yeah. You knew him?
Yeah.
Friend of yours?
Yeah.
Good.
Big J. Yeah.
If Diddy's crew thought Atlanta was just another playground, they were dead wrong. This was BMF territory. Diddy and Wolf crossed the line by sitting on Meech's car, an act considered to be disrespectful by the BMF.
Big Meech and them come outside, and Wolf and Rizzo are, I guess, sitting on on Big Meech's car.
Yeah, well, leaning against his car.
Leaning against his car.
Yeah.
As a show of disrespect.
It was just another high roller night in Atlanta. VIP booths were packed, bottles were flowing, and the music shook the walls of Club Chaos. But the second Diddy's people stepped through that door, the entire city was about to feel the consequences. On one side, Anthony Wolf Jones, Diddy's ex-bodyguard and longtime street enforcer. On the other hand, Demetrius Big Meech Flannery, the face of BMF, a street empire disguised as a record label. BMF wasn't just about luxury cars and music videos. Behind the flash was an army of well-funded, well-connected men who didn't take disrespect lightly.
Standing here with me, I can't have you disrespect her like that.
That led to verbal altercation, a physical altercation, which led to Wolf Jones ejected from the club.
Wolf wasn't soft either. He had a reputation. People knew the name. And even in a crowded club full of gangsters and celebrities, Wolf carried himself like he was untouchable. But inside that club, family didn't mean safety. Tension rose fast. Words were exchanged, drinks thrown, pride tested. And when both crews spilled into the parking lot, Atlanta became a war zone. Wolf and a friend were gunned down on the pavement. Big Meech, he caught a bullet in the backside, but lived. He later said he was running when he got hit.
Wolf decide to, when they come outside, he shoots at Meech, which caught Meech in his buttock.
But not everyone believed that. Some claimed he was walking away after delivering the hit. The headline said it was chaos, but to the streets, it looked personal, calculated, almost like payback. Meech didn't just roll with muscle, he moved with purpose. And the timing? It raised eyebrows. 8 years earlier, another man had been gunned down in Atlanta, Jake Robles, a close friend of Suge Knight. That murder helped ignite the infamous East Coast versus West Coast war, and rumors? They pointed to Wolf as the triggerman. No charges stuck, no witnesses stepped forward, but people inside the industry and in the streets believed Wolf got away with murder.
There's lots of different stories behind what happened. I remember at one point, Suge's homie gets killed in Atlanta.
Jake.
Yeah. You knew him?
Yeah.
Friend of yours?
Yeah.
Okay.
Big Jake.
If that's true, it wasn't just beef. It was a long-awaited response. You shoot one of ours. We remember. We wait. And one day, when it looks like the party's just getting started, we return fire. That night, BMF wasn't in Club Chaos just to flex. They were deep, they were watching, and when the opportunity came, they didn't hesitate. Wolf, who came to take his girl away, was dropped right there in the lot. A second man, Lamont Gertie, died beside him.
He shows up in the club and he has an argument with the BMF guys. I guess tries to drag the girl out and whatever. He gets kicked out.
Right.
And I'd heard that Big Meech and them were trying to like calm him down. Like,
Yeah, they
yo,
were.
like,
They were.
it's not that serious.
Be
like,
cool,
chill.
man. Yeah,
Meech was arrested after the shooting, but with no witnesses willing to talk, he walked. Just like Wolf had years before, it was a cycle of silence. And in street code, silence speaks volumes. The city buzzed for weeks. Diddy stayed quiet. BMF, louder than ever. Because what happened outside Club Chaos wasn't a random club shooting. It was a flashpoint, where hip-hop fame collided with real underworld rules. Diddy's crew came thinking it was a party, but BMF, they came ready for war. Meech later told police he didn't shoot anyone, that he was fleeing for his life. But the streets whispered something different, that BMF had marked Wolf, that it was retaliation for Jake, that when Meech got hit, it was only because he stuck around long enough to make sure the job was done.
Man, Yogi, my ass is burning. I'm like, what? He's like, man, I think I got shot in the ass. And sure enough, he got shot in the
Before the blood hit the pavement outside Club Chaos, before the bullets, the sirens, and the headlines, there was a man named Anthony Wolf Jones. You've probably seen him, towering behind Diddy, shades on, jaw clenched. But who was he really? He wasn't just a bodyguard. He was a presence, a shadow. Born in Brooklyn, Wolf came up when the streets spoke louder than record labels, and your name meant more than your net worth. He didn't rap, he didn't dance, but everybody in hip-hop knew Anthony Jones. He was Sean Puffy Combs' right hand during Bad Boy's golden years. In a world of champagne and spotlight, Wolf was the dark room, where threats disappeared and problems were silenced. He didn't talk much, he didn't have to. But the moment that changed everything, that night, Wolf wasn't on duty. He wasn't working security. He walked into chaos with a crew, and with his pregnant girlfriend dragging her into the scene. Witnesses say BMF was already in the building, their section lit, bottles flowing, energy high.
She was actually pregnant by Wolf. You understand? Pregnant, and Wolf thought it was his, and he was trying to get her to get rid of it or whatever like that. But she was with this other dude, and she 3-4 months pregnant by Wolf. So she's with this.
Then Wolf arrived, loud, flashy, looking to flex or intimidate. Some say he walked in like he owned the room. Others say he brought that New York energy into an Atlanta war zone. Tension sparked immediately. Drinks were spilled, words exchanged, eyes locked. The streets say Wolf and Big Meech exchanged heated words over respect, over turf, maybe even over the woman Wolf had pulled into the chaos. Some insiders say Meech felt disrespected. Others say Wolf challenged BMF's weight in Atlanta. By the time they hit the parking lot, everything exploded. Gunfire broke out, people scattered. Wolf was shot dead on the pavement along with his friend Lamont Gertie. Meech took a bullet in the backside while running. But here's the twist. This wasn't just club drama. This was a story 8 years in the making. Back in 1995, another man died. Jake Robles, Suge Knight's closest soldier, was gunned down outside a party in Atlanta. And guess who was there? Diddy and Wolf. He was arrested. He was the prime suspect, but no charges ever stuck. Nobody testified. The streets never forgot.
Suge lost a friend in Atlanta that was murdered. You know, Jake was a good guy, and they were saying all that had something to do with Puffy people.
Jake was more than a homie. He was blood. And BMF, with deep blood affiliations in Atlanta, wasn't blind to that. That's why Wolf's death didn't feel random. Not to the streets, not to the insiders. It felt calculated, silent retaliation, a score finally settled. Wolf may have walked from Jake's murder in court, but the street has its own justice system. No plea deals, no appeals, just memory, just revenge. And when he dragged his pregnant girl into that club, he might have thought he was untouchable, but in BMF territory, nobody was. Anthony Wolf Jones wasn't just security. He was a name with history, a man who carried ghosts. And on that night in Atlanta, those ghosts finally came for him. Before Wolf, before Meech, before the shootout outside Club Chaos, there was Jake Robles. And the night he was killed, a domino fell that would take nearly a decade to hit the floor. Jake Robles wasn't just another name on a list. He was more than a friend to Suge Knight. He was a soldier, a trusted right hand, somebody you could send into a hostile room and know he'd walk out with respect or with bodies. He rolled with Death Row during its most dangerous, most violent days, and when Suge made moves, Jake was never far behind. So when the Death Row camp flew to Atlanta in 1995, Jake was there, walking in Suge's shadow like a loaded gun. That night, the crew hit an upscale Atlanta nightclub, ready to celebrate not war, champagne, music, power. But on the other side of the room, Puffy, and right behind him, Anthony Wolf Jones. Quiet, watching, dangerous. What happened inside the club remains murky. Some say it started over a bottle, others say a stare. Maybe someone got shoved and no one said sorry. But whatever it was, something snapped. Words were exchanged, heat started rising, security got nervous, and when both crews spilled out onto the sidewalk, so did the bullets. Jake Robles was shot in the chest. He collapsed on the pavement, bleeding out in front of Atlanta's elite, rushed to the hospital, but he didn't make it. The suspect, Anthony Wolf Jones. And while no charges stuck, the streets never forgot. And neither did Suge or Meech.
There's lots of different stories behind what happened. I remember at one point, Suge's homie gets killed in Atlanta.
Jake.
Yeah. You knew him?
Yeah.
Friend of yours?
Yeah.
Okay.
Big Jake.
Wolf was arrested and charged with murder. The streets exploded with tension. Death Row wanted blood. But in the courtroom, the charges didn't stick. Lack of witnesses, no one wanted to talk. Just like Meech years later, Wolf walked. That's when it stopped being about music. That's when the beef between East Coast and West Coast stopped being a record label war and became real. Jake's death lit a fire in Suge. It cemented the distrust, the tension, the suspicion that someone on the other side had drawn first blood. Some believe Jake's death wasn't just a tragic moment. It was the matchstick, the spark that would eventually lead to the murders of both Tupac and Biggie. Because once Jake was gone, nothing felt off limits anymore. But while the industry moved on, some in the street world didn't forget. To them, Wolf had killed a respected man and got away with it. And in that world, time doesn't heal, it just waits. Fast forward to the early 2000s. Atlanta's power players had changed. Death Row was fading. Bad Boy was quieter. But BMF, they were rising fast. Cars, clubs, music, money, all of it stamped with Meech's name. And some of BMF's top hitters, they had deep blood ties. Some still had love for Jake. So when Wolf walked into Club Chaos that night, he wasn't just some guy from New York. He was a man who had killed one of theirs. And for some people in that crowd, that blood never dried. Jake's death was more than a single act. It was a shadow, long and unforgiving. And years later, when bullets started flying outside Club Chaos, some believed it wasn't random. It was street justice, served late, but served. One man died in 1995, another in 2003, but the line between them, straight and bloody. While Diddy was dominating award shows and owning the airwaves, another empire was rising in the shadows. And by 2003, Big Meech and BMF weren't just rich, they were untouchable. Demetrius Big Meech Flannery didn't just walk into a city, he took it over. And he didn't ask for permission from rappers, CEOs, or even kingpins. When BMF came to town, they moved like a military unit wrapped in designer clothes. No record label, no radio play, just raw street power. And they didn't hide it. Meech understood one thing clearly: image was everything. But behind the Ferraris and the fur coats, there was a multi-million-dollar drug pipeline flowing from Mexico to Miami, LA to Atlanta. They weren't trying to sign artists, they were bankrolling them. They weren't just buying jewelry, they were buying silence.
but we still need evidence that links Meech to drug trafficking. And it was pretty tough because BMF were very secretive.
To outsiders, it looked like hip-hop excess, but to insiders, it was something darker. BMF wasn't playing industry games. They were treating the rap world like another block to take over. And Meech, he wasn't just the boss, he was the brand. He'd walk into Magic City with 20 people behind him, every one of them dressed in Louis Vuitton and armed to the teeth. He didn't need security. His security were killers. People respected him, feared him, or tried to be him, but nobody ignored him. So when Wolf and Diddy's crew showed up at Club Chaos that night, they were walking into Meech's world. See, in that room, Diddy might have been famous, but Meech was feared, and that made all the difference. People who knew the streets knew the math. Diddy had clout in boardrooms. Meech had it in basements, on corners, in trap houses that never slept. He could get a call made in a different state and have someone touched in hours, quietly, permanently. They had Bloods, Crips, independent killers, all under one flag. Meech's charisma was legendary, but so was his paranoia. He moved smart, but if he felt disrespected, the response was immediate. So when Wolf's crew got loud, when words got thrown, it wasn't just egos in the mix. It was reputation, it was history, and in Meech's world, disrespect didn't slide. Even the feds were watching closely. They had tapped phones, tracked cars, and couldn't believe the lifestyle was real. They thought it was all an image, until they saw the ledgers, until they found the stash houses. But they had a code, no talking to law enforcement.
See, they gain street cred from not talking with law enforcement under any circumstances.
To the outside world, BMF looked like hip-hop's wild cousins, but on the street, they were the ones you never crossed. And when Diddy's crew stepped into that club, they weren't stepping into a party. They were stepping into a pressure cooker. It was after 3 a.m. when everything spilled outside. Meech, Wolf, their crews. No more bottles, no more flexing, just pride and pistols. What started inside with a few words turned violent fast. People close to the incident say someone bumped into the wrong guy. A shove, a threat, then it popped off. Anthony Wolf Jones, Diddy's former bodyguard, was hit multiple times. So was his friend Lamont Gertie. Both were pronounced dead right there on the pavement. Meech caught a bullet in the backside. He later said he was running away when shots rang out. But on the streets, that sounded more like strategy than fear. When the cops showed up, they found chaos. Shell casings, broken glass, and silence. Nobody saw a thing. Meech was detained but never charged. No witnesses, no statements, no names, just 2 dead men and a legend that only grew bigger. To the cops, it was a dead end. To the streets, it looked like Retaliation finally caught up with Wolf. 2 men were killed, dozens were there. But when the police started asking questions, Atlanta went silent. Not one witness stepped forward. Not one person gave up a name. Even with all the blood in the parking lot, nobody had seen a thing. Not the valet, not the club staff, not even bystanders. Why? Because this wasn't a fight between clubgoers, it was street politics. And when names like Big Meech and BMF get mentioned, people know better than to talk. The streets live by a code. No matter how wild it gets, you don't snitch. Not to save yourself, not to solve a murder, not even when it's Wolf, a man who had once been Diddy's right hand. The cops had nothing. No camera footage, no weapon, no testimonies, just bodies, rumors, and fear. This is how power works. It isn't loud. It doesn't post on social media. It moves in silence and leaves a message without saying a word. Meech walked free. Diddy never spoke publicly about it. In the streets, they understood exactly what happened and why nobody dared explain it.
See, they gain street cred from not talking with law enforcement under any circumstances.
2 of his people were gone. One was his former bodyguard, the other a loyal soldier. You'd think Diddy would have made a move, but after that night, he said nothing. Anthony Wolf Jones wasn't just a random affiliate. He was one of Diddy's most trusted men, a street-smart protector who had stuck by his side for years. To lose him in a hail of bullets was personal, but Diddy didn't retaliate. No diss tracks, no street chatter, no quiet get-back. Why? Because even with his wealth, power, and reach, Diddy knew BMF was different. Meech didn't just control a gang. He ran an army with money, muscle, and deep connections in every city. Going against BMF wasn't business, it was. There's a difference between music industry beef and real-world warfare, and Diddy, he wasn't trying to go to war. So he kept moving, quiet, calculated, focused on surviving, not avenging. He buried his people, tightened his circle, and never spoke their names in public again. When you lose someone to the streets, sometimes silence says more than revenge ever could. While bodies were dropping and crews were getting louder in clubs, the feds weren't blinking. They were listening, tapping, building a case inch by inch. The Club Chaos shootout didn't just shock the city. It lit up the FBI's radar. Suddenly, BMF wasn't just some flashy crew with cars and rappers around them. Now they were connected to a double homicide involving one of the most famous names in hip-hop. Wiretaps were already in place, phones were being monitored, and the flashiness BMF was known for, it was feeding the investigation. Every Maybach, every champagne video, every mansion party. But the Wolf shooting made things personal for law enforcement. A murder like that, with no snitches, no trail, and major celebrities nearby, it was a red flag and a green light to go harder. Meech walked that night, but the feds weren't interested in that one moment. They were watching the whole empire. They weren't going to kick the door in over Club Chaos. They wanted it all. The money, the houses, the cars, and the name Black Mafia family brought down in court. The game was changing. Meech could dodge bullets, but could he dodge the feds? Meech survived the streets. He survived Club Chaos, but he couldn't survive the wire. In 2005, the feds finally made their move. The Black Mafia family, once a mythic, untouchable empire, was now a target. Over 500 agents across multiple cities hit BMF stash spots at once. It was a full-scale takedown.
I saw my brother's picture on the big screen. Really couldn't believe it because I know that's not my brother's character.
They weren't coming for one shooting. They were coming for 20 years of money laundering and organized crime.
He was convicted of running a huge criminal enterprise stretching from Atlanta to Detroit and several other states. The story of Big Meech, who headed up the Black Mafia family, is also the source of a popular TV show that has been filmed.
Meech and his brother Southwest T were hit with conspiracy charges. The evidence was overwhelming. Wiretaps, surveillance, intercepted texts. No more hearsay. The streets could stay silent, but the phones didn't. BMF was never taken down by rivals, it was taken down by its own echo. Meech took a plea deal. 30 years in federal prison, the party stopped, the cars disappeared, and the silence that followed, it was louder than anything the Flannery brothers ever said.
He went down, and when he went down, he and his brother were sentenced to 30 years in prison.
The streets remember what you build, but they also never forget how it ends. BMF didn't just move weight. They moved culture, they dressed like rappers, lived like moguls, partied like royalty, and in the process, they became street legends. But legends come with blood on the pages. Wolf is gone, Lamont Gertie, gone, Big Jake before them, gone, and Meech still serving time. Yet their story lives on in whispers, in trap lyrics, in Instagram captions, in shows, in interviews. Some say they were the last of a dying breed, street kings who ran the game without filters. Others say they were just another cartel dressed in Fendi. But ask the streets, they'll tell you BMF proved one thing, even in an industry built on fame, the real ones move in silence. Diddy's people came to party. BMF came to remind the world. This wasn't just music, this was war, and in that war, only one crew walked away. Wolf died outside Club Chaos. Jake Robles died outside a club too. Different cities, same silence. This wasn't just about Diddy or Meech. This was unfinished business echoing through two coasts, two eras, one bullet at a time. So what do you think? Was this revenge? Or just the street calling back what it loaned? Hit the comments. Like, subscribe, and stay locked. Because some wars don't end, they just wait.